welcome back to the Tea and a Butty podcast. I'm Dominic.
And I'm Erica.
And we're going to be talking about the legend of King Arthur.
Yes.
And the Knights of the Round Table and Camelot.
Yes.
Because we've been watching a show recently on Netflix.
Yeah, an old show. I think it's been off the air for like 10 years, hasn't it?
Yeah, almost 10 years now. Yeah, it's called Merlin.
Yeah.
With Colin Morgan and Richard Wilson.
Mm.
And Bradley James. And it's kind of like Smallville.
Is it?
Yeah, that's kind of what it was like supposed to compared to, you know, because it was like Merlin's younger years.
Backstory.
Yeah.
Although it's not so backstory because
it's not really, it's just all of the legends of the Arthurian legends all mixed up and, you know, reimagined.
Yeah. With Merlin being young.
Merlin being young, yeah.
I think I have to say something to you guys because I think Dominic pointed out that I may have mentioned in another podcast or I may have said something along the lines that Canterbury Tales and the legend of King Arthur were like the same thing. And that's because I thought that it was.
Well, it's interesting because, like, in a matter of Britain and all everything that's been kind of like, the written legend of Britain.
Yeah.
Arthur's featured quite prominently in it. Because kings and queens of, like, the Tudor era kind of laid claim to, like, being descended from him.
That is just hilarious.
And people are like, he must have been a real person then.
Well, I was looking at, because, I haven't read the Canterbury Tales, obviously, because Chaucer's a very difficult author to
because that's kind of like a tome about Britain too, the Canterbury Tales.
Yeah, and I was looking it up when you said, oh no, they're separate things, like you didn't realize that I thought that they were the same thing. You didn't realize that. So I just always thought that that's what the Canterbury Tales were, because obviously I haven't read it, so I misspoke in a previous podcast.
You misspoke.
None of you called me on it, so maybe you haven't read the Canterbury Tales either, but anyway, I was looking it up because I was like, well, what the heck are the Canterbury Tales about then? And apparently there are some characters in the Canterbury Tales that recite some of the Arthurian legends to the people that they come across.
Yeah, because that's how it kind of got popular.
People mentioned it in other works of literature.
Mentioned it in other works of literature because, I mean, you know, asking is he real or not? I mean, there's, as the British Library say, there's scant evidence.
Was King Arthur real?
Was King Arthur real? For certainty, a man named Arthurus or Arthur led a band of warriors in bloody resistance against a number of invading forces, including the Saxons and Jutes, around the 5th and 6th centuries. And it's significantly earlier than most medieval legends place King Arthur.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then in the 9th history...
So they don't think that was him.
They don't think that was him.
Yeah.
In a 9th century Latin history of Britain, a Welsh monk called Nennius mentions a warlord named Arthur who fought 12 battles against invaders and who managed to fell 960 men in one go, and it's like an exaggeration typical of the historical chronicle genre of that time. Because when they were recording history in the Middle Ages... fact wasn't foremost on the mind, an issue. It was a case of like history is written by the victors.
Unfortunately,
and
I think
a most flattering portrait will do.
Unfortunately, I think we're at, it's come full circle. We're at that point in time again.
It's like, you write your own legend at the end of the day.
We're at that same point in time where fact once again doesn't really have anything to do with anything. It's like you just tell it like the way you want it to be remembered, and that's the way people will apparently remember it. So, but you and I were talking about before we started recording. Really, he could have been a real person because
I'm sure there was a guy named Arthur that was leader of something
who styled himself king. Yeah, because Back before there was
the kingdoms of Mercia.
Before there was
Saxons.
one king of Britain.
Yeah.
There were many kings, right? Like they were sort of like tribes, and the leader of each tribe declared themselves king. Like in Game of Thrones, it sounds silly.
King of the North, King of the Iron Islands. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the same sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. So there may have been a King Arthur. Who knows?
Geoffrey of Monmouth. He wrote a History of Kings of Britain in 1138. And that's the basic story of the legend of King Arthur, because he wrote about a King Arthur of Britain.
Mm-hmm. But they believe that these legends existed before this guy wrote it down.
Yes,
right?
I think it was kind of like
oral history.
And he's the first. He's also the first to outline Arthur's genealogy. According to Geoffrey, Arthur's father, Uther Pendragon, is aided by a sorcerer and prophet called Merlin.
Yeah. They mention Uther in the BBC show Merlin. Yeah. Because I had never heard of Uther, I don't think.
I think he was in Excalibur, that movie.
Oh, yeah, I haven't
seen it. I mean, he's become like he's Arthur's father. Mm-hmm. But in the History of the Kings of Britain, he says he helped... Merlin helped Uther impersonate another man and sleep with his wife, resulting in the conception of Arthur. And that's, a lot of people started building on that, two other major chronicles of the time, embellished it.
What I think is really, really awesome, and help me, it's going to be difficult to think of others off the top of our heads here, like on the spur of the moment, but can you think of any other legends that have been around for just centuries and centuries like these? No.
Really.
The Bible.
The Bible. Yeah.
But it's all written down.
It's all written down. This was all written down, and it's been revised.
It was written down after the fact.
Reinterpreted,
which apparently, if you want to believe that Arthur or any of these people were real, then this stuff was written down after the fact also. Yeah. But, I don't know, I just find it so, awesome that legends couldn't exist for that long. People would just tell their kids these stories before they went to bed, and the kids just were so into the stories that they remembered it their whole lives, and they passed it to their kids. Yeah. And they passed it to their kids, and they shared it at
campfires, bedtime stories. That's just been kind of how it's been.
There was no television or radio.
Or there was nothing to dispute the fact. Yeah. You could have some guy going, I don't believe in that, but everybody's like, oh yeah, I do. Yeah. Arthur was real.
I think in other cultures there probably are similar legends.
That
are passed down and have been passed down for as many centuries.
Yeah.
Just offhand, I can't really think of a lot of them. I don't know. I can't think of any of them. Let me know if you guys can some legends similar to this that you can think of that have existed for centuries and centuries. It's really kind of it's like that emoji where your head just explodes. It's just because it's just.
And you do look like an emoji.
Thinking about it like that, it's crazy, isn't it? And obviously stuff gets embellished, like you said, when it is passed down.
Well, yes, someone's like,
people add stuff to it, which is what happened. And his sword
apparently was too heavy to pick up. Yeah. That magically becomes he couldn't get it out of a stone. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's just it's up to whoever.
That's sort of similar to, I think we said that when we were watching Merlin. That's sort of similar to Thor's hammer, isn't it?
Yes.
That was probably maybe even the inspiration for that.
Thor's hammer. It was too heavy to... whoever wields the hammer...
Thor's hammer was probably beforehand, right? Because the Vikings came over to Britain. So.
And probably some of the Vikings were instrumental in the whole thing,
Yeah. But I think that's where the sword and the stone, like, only he who is worthy of pulling this sword out can pull it out. Is the same thing of, like, only who's worthy can
wield
lift up and wield, Thor's hammer. That's gotta be where that came from. It's way too similar.
Yeah. In the 12th century...
The 12th century.
A Norman poet called Wace... Oh, yeah, Wace, I guess. Based his Roman de Brute, A History of Britain, on Geoffrey's work, adding in new features like the special round table created for Arthur's barons so that they would not argue over precedence and status at meetings. In the 13th century, an English poet called Layman combines the Arthurian sections from Geoffrey and Wace and further expands on the legend. So, for example, he adds in a riot between barons and noblemen, all vying for status, which leads to the creation of the round table.
How progressive is that? You know, how like forward thinking and like modern is that to think of this idea that everybody is created equal?
Yeah.
You know, way back then when like that was not a thing, you know?
And I mean, well, we don't know, because I mean, that could have been thought up later on, you know, by someone interpreting the legend. It's like, oh yes, because they were all vying for status and... You know, and
no, but you just said in the 12th century he wrote that, right?
In the 12th century he wrote that.
That's progressive. Even in the 12th century is the 1100s. Like, the idea that everybody's equal and nobody has any more importance, like, to sit at a head of the table.
Yeah.
That's very, very progressive for that time.
Then Chrétien de Troyes, I guess that's what his name is. Chrétien de Troyes, a 12th century French poet.
Listeners?
French poet created the characters of Lancelot and Guinevere and expanded upon the legend. That's when, and the Knights of the Round Table.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that's when it started becoming romantic. You know, like the romance genre.
Yeah.
And
it was probably just maybe like stories of great battles before that.
Battles and Merlin helping everyone, you know, achieve, like, uniting the kingdom of Albion, which was England and whatever, you know, and just like, oh yes, you know, that would have been it. Then in the 15th century, or the 12th century, and the French literature got a hold of it, created Camelot, created the whole fictional fantasy, mystical, magical setting for it all.
Yeah.
Because they probably started to realize then, oh, this is probably this is just a story.
Yeah.
And I'm making it up, so it obviously is, you know?
Yeah.
So the La Mort de Arthur, The Death of Arthur, is a 15th century Middle English prose, and it's a reworking by Sir Thomas Malory, which there was a lot of Thomas Malorys in those days, so they're trying to figure out if that was a real...
Yeah.
That he was the real author or if someone else did it,
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
Of tales about the legendary King Arthur, Guinevere, Lancelot, Merlin, and the Knights of the Round Table, along with their respective folklore.
Oh, yeah.
And in order to tell a complete story from his conception to his death, Malory compiled, rearranged, interpreted, and modified material from the various French and English sources. And that's what everyone draws from today to tell their King Arthur story, you know?
I find it interesting. I mean, I don't know, obviously, like, the history between, you know, there's a lot of history between France and England.
There's a lot,
right?
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, they were always at war.
They were always at war, yeah. So I find it really interesting that any French writers would be writing about an English king who was, like, the greatest king of all time.
Yeah.
You know, like, why?
Why would they do that? Why would that Wace do that? He was a Norman poet, so he was French. I mean, you know, when you look at them on a map, it's only I think it's about 20 miles at its closest point between France and England. So it wasn't a long journey.
No.
At all.
On a clear day, you can see.
On a clear day, you can see,
yeah,
across from Dover or wherever, you know. And it's just kind of like, so the history is quite linked.
Yeah.
People were going back and forth all the time, you know. They were at war. They were, you know, always, you know, talking to each other, you know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, you know, like the Three Musketeers.
I guess I just always have this kind of like silly idea that, you know, because it comes from like social media and modern movies and stuff, like we hate the French, we hate the English, you know.
That's the main British
and so I guess I always think that it's
narrative.
Always been that way, but obviously it hasn't. I mean, and
I know it hasn't,
and it's not true for everybody anyway. But yeah, I don't know. I just never would have expected like it to have been written by a French person, you know.
Well, the Romantic literature, they just had a framework to work with.
Yeah.
So, you know, like, they Lancelot and Guinevere and the whole love affair between them. Mm-hmm. And of course, you know, it was kind of like stereotypically French, because it was like it was kind of like a doomed romance, wasn't it, you know?
Yeah.
And it's all like, you know, Romeo and Juliet style. Ooh, you know?
Yeah.
Which may be where Shakespeare got his inspiration for Romeo and Juliet, you know?
Yeah.
Or maybe it was a case of they were around similar time, you know, that was like the Romantic genre was like, doomed love, forbidden love. And, you know, the doom of Camelot.
Somebody had to die.
And the doom of Camelot, you know, the Round Table was destroyed and Camelot fell and it was all destruction, you know.
I mean, I don't know all the history, you know. Did you learn about all this stuff in school?
I mean, we brushed upon it.
I don't remember learning about it in school. I know I know about it.
Because it's debate, you know, like historians debate is like, it's just a story. And others will go, oh, no, you know.
Well, there's places, aren't there? There's some ruins
Merlin,
of a castle.
Tintagel.
Yeah. And that people go, this is...
And the Welsh, of course, with their folklore, like, they've taken to Merlin, like, you know, they've got statues of him everywhere. You've seen one.
But, like, Camelot is not a place in Britain, is it?
Camelot was like, no, it's not. But,
it's
I mean, again, it's like the Kingdom of Wessex.
Oh, I guess so.
You know?
They've been renamed other
things. They've been renamed other things. Albion is England, and that's kind of like...
Yeah.
That's become a byword for England now, down in Albion, you know. Old Albion.
Is it?
Yeah, they call it Albion because they don't want to call it England, you know, because it's a story.
Yeah.
You know.
But I just don't remember, like, we didn't have to read any of this kind of stuff in school or anything, but I just know it. You know, like when we were watching Merlin and he throws the sword in the lake. Just
Disney.
Something in the back of my head.
This is all Disney stuff.
I've never seen it.
You've never seen The Sword and the Stone?
No. I've never seen it.
And that's what it's called, isn't it?
But somehow him throwing the sword in the lake was so familiar, and I mean, obviously, I've heard the legend of the sword and the
Excalibur.
stone.
Yeah, that's like the major one.
I vaguely think that maybe when I was like very little, like very very little.
Yeah.
There must have been something on television, like PBS or I don't know what, you know. Just
The Legend of King Arthur.
Just in the background.
Or Excalibur.
Yeah.
The movie.
Of me being
late
little
70s,
and playing,
early 80s.
And just hearing these names of these people and Merlin and King Arthur and, you know, knights. I have little flashes of things like that, but we definitely did not learn about this in school. Ever.
We brushed upon it. I mean, I must have seen something on it, you know.
So it's kind of weird because it's just.
But I think I grew up knowing it was just a story and there wasn't actually a King Arthur.
Well, yeah, I mean,
because Camelot, you know, it's like Camelot doesn't exist, so
yeah.
Why would King Arthur exist? You know.
Yeah.
I knew about Alfred the Great.
But then maybe
he existed.
But then maybe he did. We don't know. You know. I like to think he did.
Alfred the Great. Yeah. I mean, uniting the kingdoms. That's basically what the Last Kingdom does, isn't it? Mm-hmm. You know, it's like uniting the kingdoms to make one England. Yeah. You know?
And so watching that,
my dream. You know.
And so watching that the whole time, I was kind of thinking, is he the one that Arthur's based on? You know, they both of their names start with an A.
Alfred the Great. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're both these great kings, and they have really...
The greatest king. You know?
But no, it's just weird to me that, you know, we never learned about it in school, but yet I just know, I know about it. You know, it's kind of one of those things that's just like, it's ingrained in you somehow.
I mean...
Which is how it's existed for so long, you know?
It's existed for so long because it gets revived every so often. And I mean, today everything is being plundered for, you know, entertainment, you know?
Mm.
And, so, you know, you have, like, all this kind of, like, stuff like the legend of King Arthur, you know, and it starts up as, like, a small story, then it gets bigger, like, in the 15th century, and then it kind of dies off again.
Yeah.
And in the 19th century, it gets you know, kind of like Shakespeare's stuff, it got a Renaissance period, you know?
Yeah.
A rebirth, and it was just, like, you know, now it's just, like, everyone's making movies about it. I mean... There was the Guy Ritchie film.
Yeah, we watched that, didn't we? That was pretty
and that
good.
was kind of like, and it was interesting to note that the every time it gets reborn, it's kind of mirroring the contemporary situation.
Yeah, society,
whatever's going
you know, on in society. Yeah.
So Guy Ritchie's was like poverty and equality and.
I mean, that's always going on anyway.
That's always been going on.
You know,
I mean, apparently it was always going on in the day. So it's just kind of like someone forged this story and wrote it because, oh yeah, you know, it's something that's going on. It's something that's close to my heart, you know. And the Lancelot and Guinevere was like, oh, that was what was capturing the imaginations at the time, you know, like, oh, you know, the Regency period, all that kind of like. Yeah. Romantic stuff, you know, it's just like, oh, you know, this is it.
Well, it's like the Wizard of Oz, isn't it? People like the Wizard of Oz, but really it was written as about farmers, and you know, it was a what do you call it? It was a comment on society.
Social comment,
well.
Social commentary.
It was the same thing, but it just used different characters to represent different things, and it's just like it wasn't about what
metaphors
it seemed like.
And everything like that. Yeah. I mean, metaphorical.
Kind of
I mean, that's true.
That's
with
what a
most
good
stories.
story. That's what a good story does, though, isn't it? Yeah.
Because I mean, you know, but there's people out there that won't realize it. You know, they just want to be entertained.
Yeah.
You know, they want the magical elements. They want Merlin to be, you know, doing magic and...
Merlin exists in my head, okay?
Yeah, you met Merlin, didn't you?
Him and Dumbledore.
Merlin.
And Gandalf.
Dumbledore
you know.
basically is Merlin.
Yeah, I mean,
Merlin's beard.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously where she got that idea
Yeah,
from.
because, I mean, the whole image of, like, you know, Gandalf, you know, these old Dumbledore, long white beards, long white haired robes, and the pointy hat. It's like, it's Merlin. It comes from that, doesn't it?
Yeah,
you know, it's just like, old man, you know. And,
Yeah.
they make fun of that in the Merlin show.
Mm.
You know, like, they have him as young Merlin, but he can do, like, an aging spell, and he turns into Emrys, which is what the druids know him as.
Yeah.
Or everyone else knows him as. So he's Emrys then, and he's like... He's the Merlin that everyone knows, you know. Yeah. And he's like the Merlin of that statue's like all jolly.
He's like a crazy little Emrys. Crazy little wizard.
He's a crazy little wizard, but, you know, you have to be crazy to do that magic.
They always called him Merlin the Magician, though, didn't they?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Merlin the Magician.
What other...
Oh, you're a regular Merlin, you are.
So have you seen all those films then? Like, I know there's...
I've seen Excalibur, but not for years. I was like a kid when I watched it.
I've never seen it unless that's what I am having flashes of being on television from when I was little.
And they set it in the medieval period because knights and chivalry and all that.
A kid in King Arthur's court? Does that have anything to do with anything?
Connecticut Yankee and...
No, a kid in King Arthur's court.
Oh, I don't
it's
know.
like a Disney movie, I think.
Oh, no,
I've never seen that one.
And there you go, Mark Twain wrote a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that was another, you know, just melding. You know, just like, I don't know. I never read it, but, you know, it was like, that's what it was like, King Arthur, you know.
I'm very into all the mystical, magical
Yes.
things.
Ever since Harry Potter, I think.
And
it was
historical.
Harry Potter, wasn't it?
Oh, no. Just, it's been my whole life.
Disney.
It's probably it comes from Disney from when I was a kid. But yeah, no, Wizard of Oz, you know, as I mentioned before, it's like I've always been into like magic and fantasy kind of like creatures and elements, and that's where I live in my head, okay?
Well, you know, she wants a little goblin to come and say hello to her.
Yeah, so just the whole...
He goes, boo!
So just the whole story of this, I don't know why it took us so long to watch Merlin, really.
I was still living in the UK when it started. And I remember seeing Richard Wilson as Gaius.
Yeah.
You know, people were talking about him, and I was just like, oh yeah, you know, because it's like he's finally doing something to get out of the Victor Meldrew
yeah.
people see him as, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, yeah, he's in all 5 seasons of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Colin Morgan hasn't really done too much else.
I mean, if we're being honest, I think that it could have been done better. I don't want to criticize it in a way that makes it seem like it's no good, you know? I mean, we're in the 5th season, so we've obviously watched it.
No, it's good. I mean, because it's easy, as I keep saying this, it's easy Sunday night viewing. Mm-hmm. And it was intended for an audience of kids.
And it's like a basic telling of the story, isn't it? You know?
Older people, too.
Yeah.
You know? People who remember how shows used to be made. They didn't want a Game of Thrones sweeping epic.
It has a very 1970s kind of vibe to it.
I'd say it was more 1990s. You know, the way it's...
Oh, I'm not talking about production value. I just mean the general vibe. Like, it just feels to me like...
Because they're reusing Puzzlewood all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because they always go to Puzzlewood for location.
Go listen to our Puzzlewood podcast if you have no idea what we're talking
Puzzlewood, yeah. Go listen to that.
But yeah, I mean, I need to go there.
Forest of Dean.
I need to go visit...
We need to dress you up and you can go there and you can be all magical with your cloak and everything. And
Tintagel Castle, that's in Cornwall, is it?
Tintagel or Tintagel? I think it's Tintagel.
Isn't it in Cornwall? And who determined, this is the remnants
Well, why
of
is there
King
a statue
Arthur's...
of Merlin and Carmarthen's
I think
town
that
centre?
has to do, based on my research,
yeah.
I think that has to do with the apparent popularity of the legend in the Legend of Camelot in Wales.
That photo of you with Merlin.
Apparently when it came out, it was like it took off in Wales.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Maybe Wales is a more magical place
Celtic
than
folklore.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
And I think Emrys is like it's part of his Celtic name. That's why they always call him Emrys.
So the Druids call him.
Druids and everyone else who's magic, they go Emrys.
Yeah.
You know, because they just think that Merlin is just something that your mother named you. Yeah. We know you as Emrys. Yeah. Because your story's been written
since the dawn of time.
Yeah.
Story's been written since the dawn of time. You guys, it's so good. I know it just sounds like cheesy, but I just love that kind of thing. I just love it.
Yes.
I do.
And we're going to put that picture of you and Merlin up.
No, we're not.
Yes, we are.
No, we're not.
Because everyone loves you and Merlin. And Merlin looks all jolly, just like that.
But yeah, I thought that was really random when we did see Merlin. But then when I was researching the other day about it, I think that's why. Because
like, what's Merlin doing here?
Apparently, it really took off in Wales, the story. So, yeah, let's erect a statue of Merlin in the middle of town for no apparent reason. You know, there's not going to be anybody, petitioning to have that statue removed, though, is there? It's like that statue's there to stay.
Maybe Morgana.
Yeah, I do wonder how many of the characters that they mention in this series exist in the writings or in the
pretty much all
like,
of them. Like Morgana, Mordred.
I didn't remember seeing anything about Morgana in my quick little research that I was doing about it, though. Did you? Any mentions of Morgana? There's Morgan.
Morgan Le Fay.
Le Fay.
Yeah, she's like the Morgan of the fairies.
Yeah.
And then there's the Lady of the Lake. And then there's Mordred.
Yeah.
You know, but I think Mordred
But
was
I don't know if Morgan Le Fay is where Morgana came from, or if Morgana is actually a character in the Arthurian legend. I don't know.
I think it's Morgan Le Fay. It came from that. So.
Anyway, if any of you guys listening know anything about anything we're talking about more than we do,
yes,
please let me know, because I'm
if
very
you're a
interested.
Merlin or Arthur historian,
yeah,
contact us.
Even if you're not a historian, even if you're just into it, if you've read these the 12th century or 15th century or whatever it is writings and retellings of these things, I mean, it's possible. People like to read. Let me know, because I need to know whether that's something that I possibly need to read. I want to find, I wonder if there's a modern compilation of all the legends, but told in
a modern way.
Not in a modern language.
In modern language, yeah, because, I mean...
Because sometimes that old language is a bit too fruity and it loses me.
Yeah, it's a little bit too descriptive.
Flowery.
And also the spellings and everything is a bit weird, too.
Yeah, and just the language in general can be a bit difficult. I mean, I still have a little bit of trouble with Shakespeare, so anything even earlier than that is definitely not going to be. Oh, one last thing. We are over time, but that you found when you were researching that I think is really cool in Merlin is anytime they're doing the incantations, anytime he's doing the spells, it's actual Old English.
It's actual Old
use.
English, yeah, and you can tell that sometimes
awesome.
when they're doing the healing spell, they say elixir in it.
Yeah.
And elixirs
when he's
Old
talking
English.
to the dragon, he goes, "Oh, dragon!"
Oh, dragon! And he's calling him. Yeah, there's a dragon in it, too.
Yes.
And it's John Hurt.
He's a really cute dragon, too, so... Yeah, if you're into fantasy things like me, go ahead and watch the show. It's not Game of Thrones. It's a very easy, something you can watch with kids, it's...
Yeah, I mean, that's why they make it like that, so it's not...
Some of the episodes are a little samey, but...
Contrived, yeah. I mean, the recycling plot at the end of the day, because...
Yeah, we need content.
Yes. Like us,
but...
we're recycling this.
We're recycling.
We're going to do this 12 times. Just to fill out...
Yeah, so on Thursday, Merlin...
Emrys.
Legend of Arthur Part 2. No.
It'll be the Highlands.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, we appreciate your support. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Like I said before, if you are into this same kind of genre, and if you know anything about this legend more than me and Dominic, let me know, because I'm very interested. But yeah, other than that, just be sure you're following us on social media. We are at Butty on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. TEABUTTY. And we'll talk to you next time.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.